Hello, Patriots. I'm Lee Watts, and this is Patriot Point, your source for Kentucky news and analysis from a conservative, Christian, and common sense point of view. Well, Merry Christmas to everyone. On last week's episode, I was telling you about this major anti-gun law that was going to be proposed before the Kentucky State Legislature. This law was proposed this last week, and here is what happened. First of all, the person said, this is the law we're proposing, and it's what's called a red flag law. It's where somebody goes through a process and can have a judge issue an order to take somebody's guns away before they commit a crime. Now, here's the problem. The person who is having their guns taken away, which is their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, being violated, they haven't committed a crime yet. Somebody just thinks they might commit a crime in the future. So I listened to the testimony on this bill, and this is what the sponsor of the bill said. They're like, well, actually, you are going to have an opportunity to not have your guns taken away, because there's two or three different versions of this law he came up with. The first idea is the policeman shows up at your door, says, I'm going to take all of your guns away, but I won't do that if you agree to go before a judge and have a hearing within 2 hours from now. Now, let's think about that. Some policeman shows up at your door and says, I'm taking all of your guns, but you can go before a judge in 2 hours to try to keep them.
What?
This is an inane concept. So he had a second version of this bill saying, okay, the policeman shows up at your door saying, I'm taking all of your guns away, and in 2 weeks you can have a hearing to get your guns back. Keep in mind, you've not committed any crime at all. Somebody just thinks you might commit a crime at some point in the future, perhaps. Then they have a third option that says, well, they're going to have a hearing right away. In fact, before you're ever even notified, and you're not even allowed to be at this hearing because you didn't even know it was happening. These are the three different versions of this law that they came up with. Now, I want to give some props and some really bragging a little bit on some of the members of the Kentucky State Legislature who stood up in this committee, and they asked some hard questions to the writer and sponsor of this bill. One of them is Kentucky State Representative Savannah Maddox. And she said, listen, if you have somebody showing up taking your guns away, this is a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. The Fourth Amendment guarantees you from protection against unreasonable search and seizure. And so they're like, hey, somebody's going to come to my house and just go through all of my stuff looking for these weapons when I haven't committed any crimes. There's been no trial. There's been no anything. And they're just going to do this. This is a violation of my privacy, of your Second Amendment, your Fourth Amendment, and other constitutionally protected rights. The sponsor of the bill, he went so far as to say, listen, Representative Maddox, your rights aren't going to be violated because this is all going to be done on the, quote, honor system. Let's think about this. You have somebody who you are suspecting is going to commit mass murder with a gun, and you're going to show up at their house saying, hey, we're here to collect all your guns, and on the honor system, you are supposed to give all your guns to me. Does anybody in their right mind think that would ever work even one time in the history of the entire universe? I do not. I'm not one of those people. If you have someone who is actually mentally unstable, who is actually going to commit mass murder, they're not going to use the honor system to give you their guns. Hooray for her asking the question. And when he gave that as an answer, that was an early Christmas gift to every conservative in Kentucky. Thank you for that. They also had somebody testifying in support of this bill was the chief of police from Jeffersontown, Kentucky. And he told an account of this horrible situation where this student had gone to their school, and they'd done a mass shooting and killed all of these people in this horrific act. And then it goes on to say at the end of the story that this teenager who committed the murder had stolen the guns from their grandfather to commit the crime. So I want you to think about this. This bill would take the guns away from the owner of the gun, which means the entire story he told would do absolutely nothing to stop the incident he was telling us about, because it wasn't that person who owned the guns. That person stole weapons from somebody else who lives in another house. So again, just holes in this thing big enough to drive a Mack truck through. I'm happy to tell you that all the testimony supporting this was just riddled with holes. Let's give you some other ideas. They said, well, this will help prevent suicides. And they talked about other states who had passed this law. I did some research. I can't find anything saying that the suicide rates in those other states that did pass this actually went down. Please show me if you can actually find those things. And all of the illustrations that they were using for this were just the most inane things that you'd ever want to hear. And I got to tell you this, the group showed up that were in support of this bill, and I put out notifications. Some other conservative commentators did, and I am happy to report that the conservatives showed up in force. It was so many people that they filled up the committee room, they filled up a second room, they filled up a third room, and there were people standing out in the hall. The conservatives who were standing up to support your Second Amendment rights outnumbered the gun grab crowd by, I'd say, 10-1. And I got to say, at the end of the day, the committee did not seem to, as a whole, have any appetite to actually see this bill. I think this bill is as dead as old Marley was in A Christmas Carol. And so there were a few representatives who can ask the hard questions that I just want to publicly call out to say, good job. You don't always agree with everybody 100% of the time, but when they do something good, I think they deserve a shout out. So here's just a few of the representatives that really asked the hard questions, showed the problems in this bill, and really helped support the Second Amendment. And that would be, I'd mentioned Representative Savannah Maddox. There's also Representative Steve Rawlings and Representative Jason Neems. These three in particular really asked questions that showed many of the flaws that are a part of this bill. So thank you, conservatives. I understand several of the legislators told me that they got all kinds of calls and emails and people showed up. This was a great victory for the conservative cause in Kentucky. And it really warmed my heart this Christmas to see so many patriots who stood up, showed up, and we won this one and made a big difference. So thank you for that. Now, we're going to be talking next week about another bill that was proposed that day that has some good things and some bad things in it, including wiretapping. And you're going to want to make sure to hear what's being proposed on that next week. Each week, I always like to tell you where I'm going to be speaking at across the state. Have a busy calendar this coming week. On January the 29th, I'll be speaking at the Election Integrity Conference over in Hodgenville, Kentucky. You need to make reservations for this. Tickets are cheaper if you call ahead of time than they are at the door. There is the email where you can request information. Then on December the 30th, I'll be speaking at a pro-life event and a prayer service that's going to be in Bardstown, Kentucky. That one is free and open to the public. And then on New Year's Eve night, December the 31st, we're going to be having what's called an old-fashioned watch night service that starts that evening, and we will have preaching and special music and singing, and then a prayer time right at midnight to usher in the new year. Go down there every year for that. It's a wonderful way to usher in the new year. So that's what we have going on this week and what's coming up next week. So until next week, Merry Christmas. And never forget that liberty is not a spectator sport.